I'm Jenny Robertson, founder of the On Purpose Woman Global Community and the founder and publisher of On Purpose Woman magazine. I'm talking with caregiving consultant, happiness trainer, author, and speaker, Toni Gitles, about her article in the May-June issue of On Purpose Woman. Toni, before we start that conversation, please tell our viewers a bit about you.
Well, my background is in healthcare. I was an audiologist for over 30 years, worked in a children's hospital and adult hospital and at the Heart Institute. And that was real eye-opening. I learned a lot about diseases, a
Mm.
lot about, you learn a lot about things that that aren't typical in your life. Um, so I traveled around the country with different jobs. I had a really incredible career. And my dad bought a hearing aid manufacturing company at one point. So I
Oh,
came to work
interesting.
for him. Yeah. So mom, dad, and I were very happy working together and making a difference in the audiology and hearing community. Um, my dad died in 1989, and so we had a long time without him. I
Mhm.
was in my 30s at the time. I went back to work, and I left the company and went back to work. We sold the company. And I think the most important thing is I got a call from my mother at one point, and she said she needed help. And she was 86 years old, living in Florida, and I was in California. Quite a distance between us.
Yeah.
I realized at that point, I did come home and visit her and took her to the doctor, and we talked about, arrangements and her life and what she needed. And I wound up moving back to Florida to be with her. You know, it's kind of eye-opening. We say don't pay attention to the numbers, to the age, but when you're 86, you don't know how long you have to live. And that was really a priority in my mind, that I was available to move, and it was time to spend the rest of her life
Mhm.
together so that I didn't miss out on anything. And I'm glad I did. She lived to be 100, so that was a lot of time together. And she did have a healthcare crisis, and wound up putting her in an assisted living facility. But I took care of her for 14 years. It started out with real easy things like just accompanying her to the doctors, going shopping with her, the fun stuff, going out to restaurants, until she wound up in the hospital one day. And the thing that people need to know, because we don't think about illness or a crisis situation, is it can happen in a moment. She woke up one morning and couldn't get out of bed, totally unexpected. So, you have to be prepared in life for whatever life throws you. And we can talk about that a little bit too. The preparation
Yeah.
is really important, because everyone will probably be a caregiver at some point or need care.
And behind you is a copy or a blow up of your book, 21 Mistakes Caregivers Make. And this article you wrote for On Purpose Woman magazine is called Turn Your Mistakes as a Caregiver into Solutions for Less Stress and Greater Confidence. And this is, you share 6 of the mistakes that you write about in your book. And we're going to talk about 3 of them today, because I really want people to go read your article to get the rest of your story and the rest of the mistakes. And then please, please, please check out Toni's book, because I have the book and I'm not caregiving for anybody right now. But we were talking a little bit before we got on here, Toni, about how when you become a patient, these are valuable things to know about how to treat yourself, right?
Yeah, these are
And
really good guidelines for
they're
every human,
guidelines. They're
because
guidelines for life.
yeah, for
Because
life.
they
Well, I
really
tried
are.
tried to incorporate things like happiness and celebration in there,
Yes,
as
yes.
well as specific caregiving duties.
Well, start out. What are some of the forms that caregiving can take? Because I don't think we actually look at all things as caregiving.
Right. Well, you might be taking care, you can take care of anyone. We think of
Right.
family members, but it could be a friend, could be a neighbor that you just drop in on. It could be a short-term or a long-term caregiving journey. Um, I have an illness that I am always going to have, and it's going to get worse. So I have to have a caregiver or a plan for caregiving in the future.
Mhm.
Right now, I'm living alone and I'm able to function independently, but I do have a caregiver that comes with me to doctor's appointments. So we be sure to get all of the information that they're giving us, and then we create a plan. There's also long distance caregiving. And sometimes when you're in another state, and maybe your sibling is taking care of your mom, you feel like you're not a caregiver, but you really are a caregiver because you care about that person
Mhm.
and you're part of the family. So I just like to change people's perspectives on what caregiving is and how they might be able to help, even if they're long distance, because there's so many things that person is doing that is either living with the individual or living nearby. And shouldering all the responsibility of
Right.
caregiving duties.
Thank you for that. I really like the way you reframed that because, I had that situation where my sister and her husband moved from, where were they, Missouri at the time, to North Carolina when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And my
Mhm.
dad had gotten really sick and he was not doing well because he was grieving her illness. And so they moved in with him. And up here, I wanted to know what was going on, but I was also so careful of not wanting to step on toes or, she's in it, she's doing it. And I don't
Mhm.
want to ask a question that implies that I don't trust what she's doing. So there
Right.
was this kind of interesting dance that we did around each other in the earlier days until we got comfortable with,
Mhm.
and I just let her know, call me for anything. Please call me for anything. But yeah, it can be that weird, especially if the relationships are already a little weird in families, and then when that happens,
Right.
one member can feel like they just got dumped with everything. And then somebody else feels like somebody else is making all the decisions and nobody's even asking me. So it can just bring up all kinds of things that were already there, probably under the
Mhm.
surface, and they get magnified, I imagine,
They
when
do. Yeah.
there's mom or dad, especially included in the mix.
Well, you were very generous to your sister in the way you listened, and there so many people get judgment and are told what they should be doing,
Right.
yet they're, like you say, they are not the one that is doing it, whether it's 4 hours a day or 8 hours a day or 24 hours a day. It's a completely different perspective. And communication is one of the things I talk about in the book because it's
Hmm.
so critical. And relationships. You don't want people to be afraid to talk to you or be afraid to come into your environment and help out. But the conversation that you have with people can put them off, or
Yeah.
the way you respond to their comments also, because caregivers really are very isolated and our life gets smaller and smaller as the attention goes to the caregiver and away from the activities that we had in our normal life. And it could be working as well. A lot of people have to leave their jobs,
Yeah.
and it's the changes are very big in many circumstances.
Hmm. And let me be clear, I was not a saint in this. I thought things, but I just didn't say them out loud. You know what I mean? I tried to put myself in that position and go, what would I want right now?
Yeah.
And even going to visit, I could see firsthand what it what it's like on a day-to-day basis. There's no downtime unless you've got somebody else, coming in and unless you got some care for the caregiver, which you know so
Right.
well.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that first mistake, which is you are
Okay.
unprepared for a family member's health crisis. How might we be more prepared for the sudden and unexpected?
Well, the most obvious thing is if a person currently is diagnosed with some health issue. For example, my issue, I have myasthenia gravis, and it started out being not being incapacitating at all, but I know that it's going to change and
Mm.
likely get worse over time. So, at the early stages, I can prepare for that, and my caregiver can prepare for that. Getting a caregiver was important. Having someone that knew my medical history, knows the medications that I'm taking and the allergies, all that good stuff they ask you when you go to the emergency room. Insurance, what's your insurance? So I have people create a notebook for that individual, or the individual can create it for themselves, so that all the relevant medical history is available, and including the allergies, because that's a question that's
Mhm.
asked, and any significant doctors that are involved in a regular ongoing care. Um, I also have listed my care partner on this sheet, and he is my healthcare surrogate. So in case I get incapacitated and unable to make decisions, they know who to call. So it's a one page that is full of information, and it's color coded because so I can read it. I like colors and they stand out. But when I go to the emergency room and hand the uh, the nurse or whoever's interviewing me the piece of paper, they're very impressed. They know you mean business,
They're
and
probably
they're
very
going to
grateful
treat you
too.
very, yeah, they're very grateful, but they're going to treat you very seriously. And I do, announce whether I'm the patient or I'm the caregiver in some instances. I tell people I am the caregiver for this gentleman, or he is my caregiver. So he's going to help me fulfill on your recommendations. That they pay attention a little bit differently
Okay.
when you set up the scene for them. Now, there's a couple of other things that are maybe difficult or sensitive conversations, but caregiving can get very expensive. So to have some idea of the individual's financial abilities and even a list of their assets, where they're banking, that information could be helpful down the road. Now, I had that information on my mother from the beginning
Mhm.
because, she was freely sharing all of that information with me because she relied on me to take care of her. Other people may be very sensitive about sharing that information. And the final thing that's really important is legal documents. Um, Not everybody has legal documents of any kind. It even has a will. This is a problem, that is faced all the time. And the legal documents are incredibly important, mostly when that individual passes, because they have wishes, and whatever is stated in those documents is what is going to be carried out. You can't change it after the person dies and say, "Oh, dad meant to do this. Dad meant to
Mhm.
change his will." Well, if he didn't do it, and if you don't know where it is, and are part of that community of knowing physicians, knowing uh, the accountant or the financial planner, and knowing the attorneys. That's really important. And again, when nothing's wrong, it's kind of hard to have those conversations. Now, I would assume a husband and wife would have that managed, more so than with your parents, looking at you have aging parents or ill parents, and getting that information in order. But there's so many places for arguments to take place. Um, but I was going to say this before when you mentioned something, when you have these thoughts going on in your head, but you don't always say what's going on. That's very common. And that's a very important point. Um, I always tell people, what would you say to that individual coming from a place of love
Mm.
and caring?
Yeah.
Stop and think, because what you say is going to make a difference, right? And you don't want to get in an argument. Anything judgmental will create friction and a response that will take you a whole nother direction. So, tell people, I want to be there for you. I love you, Mom. I want to take care of you. Um, and this will make it so much easier and less stressful for me.
That's such a beautiful sentiment. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And let's go to mistake number two. Everything changes and you fail to change. And it sounds like you're talking about being in denial about maybe the info you're receiving.
Right,
Say more about
right.
that.
Yeah, this um, would be you notice some symptoms, something's wrong with yourself or another person in the family, but you don't get it checked out. You wait,
Mhm.
um, because you're afraid of the diagnosis. You're afraid something is actually wrong and your concerns are going to be validated. Or maybe you have something about the medical community. You don't like your doctor, or they weren't helpful in the past. The past really influences our decisions in the future. Um, but it's important, especially, well, it's important in many different cases. I had breast cancer, and as soon as it came up a suspicion on the mammogram, I took action. It's like that's something women know not to wait,
Mhm.
to do. So I saw my gynecologist, and I had more testing done, and it was confirmed that I had an issue. I got an oncologist, went for a visit, and surgery was scheduled within, I think, a month to 2 months from the initial diagnosis. Um, it was caught early too. It was stage one. It was caught early, and I don't have any serious cancer stories to share with people. I've been in remission for 5 years, and so I took care of it. If I had, dismissed the findings on the test, and well, I'll wait another year
Right.
till my next test. It can't be anything. I feel fine. So, our natural instinct, I think, is to deny hearing bad news.
Mm.
And I do know people that are still denying after many years and not willing to, engage with the medical profession to find out how to best help this person. And that's really disheartening because there are solutions, there are strategies, and there's a way to learn about how to do this and do it well. Also, there's not everybody's heard of clinical trials, but there's a lot of drugs that are being tested, and people can participate in those clinical trials if they meet certain criteria. For example, I work with the dementia community quite a bit, and once the disease has progressed to a certain stage, you're not eligible anymore to
Mm.
try out some of these new drugs. So you miss opportunities that could be beneficial.
Yeah. So you're talking both from a personal standpoint of how we handle these things ourselves, but also
Mm.
we can be
Yeah.
in denial about the diagnosis that our loved one or whoever we're caregiving for, or that we know we're not going to become a caregiver. We can kind of be in denial about that too, right? And become more rigid. And it sounds like that's what you're
Yeah.
saying. Yeah.
Or we can just decide things that wait. How often do we put things off?
Mm.
Less important things than our health,
Right. Right.
but even, going for an annual checkup, we can put that off because we feel so good.
Mm.
Everything's fine. But to me, I just grew up and my career is in the medical field. So, I have a different perspective on things. It's check it out right away.
Mhm.
Find doctors that you trust. We fired a couple doctors when I was taking care of my mom.
Yeah.
If you don't like the doctor, if you don't like the attorney, get someone who has a bedside manner that is congruent with how you want to be taken care of by that
Mhm.
individual.
Okay. Number three, you don't prioritize your well-being. Is this the one you see with most caregivers you've met?
Yeah, this is the biggest mistake people make, and it was my biggest mistake as well. But what happens is we start putting our attention on that individual because we want to do it right. We want to do the best job. They need us. They're needing us there. They're needing help with different things, and our routine just goes right out the window. Or if we had good skills, good self-care skills early on, we can probably more easily continue them. Um, but once the stress kicks in and your attention is on that other person, I want to be a good daughter.
Yeah.
I want to take care of my mom. I know a lot about healthcare. I'm going to do this right. I'm going to be available all the time. But you can't really operate from the most efficient point with that kind of thinking. So taking breaks every couple hours, just doing breathing exercises, establishing a routine, setting boundaries. I finally set some boundaries with my mom. She was just always wanting me to be with her, and I wanted to spend time with her, but not all day, every day.
Right.
So I found out that she enjoyed talking on the phone to me almost more or equally as well as me being in person with her. So a phone call was much easier to manage, much less time and effort on my part. And she loved it. So we had a good time. So these conversations are really important. And we think of self-care. I mean, there's three basics of self-care, and that's eating properly, drinking enough water, getting enough sleep, and movement of some kind. But also in the book, I talk about, well, what is your spiritual life like?
Mhm.
Intellectually, what are you doing for stimulation? So it's an expanded version of what most people think of as self-care. And I hate for people to think of it as a to-do list, but okay, you're taking great care of your loved one. just do the same thing for
And probably
yourself.
have a checklist for that.
You got to check. Yeah, you've got to check. I had all my checklists were so
Mhm.
helpful. And I know things got done. Yeah, I'm in the process of making a checklist for myself. Absolutely.
And even when we're not dealing with something, some serious illness or with another person, the best of intentions can just go awry. So I think what I hear you saying too, to those of us who are out here not in caregiving positions yet, or not dealing with a serious illness ourselves, is to get something in place now. Make
Yes,
some, because we're all going to be caregiving at least somehow, a little bit, I think,
that's right.
you
Yeah,
know.
one of the things too, my mom, well, she was 89 when I moved her to an assisted living, and she lived another 11 years. We wound up in the emergency room quite a bit for things that you would never suspect and
Mhm.
that you couldn't plan for. So I had an emergency go bag put together. And I had a list, I had a checklist reminding me to put some water in there, put some granola bars or fruit, put a book to read, a notebook to take notes from the doctor. So there was a whole, and all of her medical information as well. So it was all in one place. When I got a call from the assisted living facility that mom was on her way to the emergency room, can you meet her there? And I would say yes. All I had to do was put some water in my bag and put it in the car. And I was prepared, somewhat, and brought my medications as well. Well, I
Mhm.
was prepared for a long stay in the emergency room if it was going to be necessary.
Oh, that's so smart. And Toni, you wrote this book, which I mentioned earlier, 21 Mistakes Caregivers Make,
And how
and
to
How
avoid them.
to Avoid Them. Yes. And you wrote this from your personal experience a lot, and I imagine from talking to other caregivers. And as I mentioned before, I have your book, and your book is full of really great life advice as well. It's not just about caregiving. But can you say a few words about like I kind of know why you wrote the book, but writing the book was I mean, that's a lot of work. And it
Yeah, it
just
was.
came out, I think, last fall, wasn't it?
Yeah, in September it did.
Okay. And so what kept you going? What inspired you? And then what kept you going until you saw it completed?
When my mom had her healthcare crisis at the very beginning, she was 89 years old. The neurologist showed me her brain scan or her x-rays, MRIs, and said, if your mother survives, she will never live independently again. Well, pull the rug out from under me. Okay, where's my manual? Where's the book on how to take care of your mom when she can't live independently again? So that was a long time ago. And there was no manual. There were some books out, that long ago, not as many as there are now. And, the internet is full of great information and, about caregiving as well. But I just thought, how can you leave a hospital being told that information and not be given a how-to book or more
Something.
than a something more than a piece of paper that said home health care is going to call you and set up an appointment to come over. That's it. That was it. So it took me a long time to write the book, but yeah, a lot of it is based on my experience. But when mom passed away, and it's been 7 years now, 7 years. I've been talking with other caregivers through my business. I consult with other caregivers and help them guide them on their journey. There are things that people have told me, along the way, or that I can see going on. So they've validated what's in the book, and some of the mistakes came from what they were making, because they're not all mistakes I made. We had legal documents in order. I knew mom's financial. I knew her medical history, but there were other mistakes that I made, and I want people to have less stress and to may have this an easier journey. I said to myself, this has to be easier than what I'm going through. And I realized, at the beginning too, of the other caregivers that had their mom or dad in the assisted living, they were saying the same thing. This has to be easier. We're working so hard to figure things out. Um, so that I realized there was so much information, and I kid about the title of the book, 21 Mistakes, when I started talking about the book, a gentleman came up to me and he said, "There's only 21." And I said, "No, there's more." But the book was getting kind of long, so I cut it off. Um, so it's a book on prevention, how to prevent these,
Mhm.
and some things you can't prevent because caregiving is very emotional. So you can't, I don't want you to try to manage your emotions. I want you to learn how to de-stress though and take care of yourself better.
And another thing I really love about your book, Tony, is that you're very gentle with it and you're using the word mistakes, but you're not making people wrong for having made them. You're very loving in your approach. And really, I believe you encourage people to let go of their perfectionism around all of this, right? To use, like you said, you were going to do it all perfectly well. You were going to do it just right. You were going to be the superwoman. You were going to be better than anybody else could be at doing this job because you knew things, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did carry some strengths into that situation because I was used to talking to physicians. I taught physicians. I worked with them on a regular basis for many years. So I wasn't afraid of them and I wasn't afraid to get the information, to keep asking questions. And I was always good at asking questions. Being a shy person, this is the trick. Ask other people questions because they'll love talking to you. And,
Mhm.
it's a way to connect with people. Now, the doctors don't always have as much time as you think they're going to have with you, so that can be an issue too. Mostly in the hospital, though, not at, um, private appointments.
Mhm.
But it's important to find doctors that you can work with, that want to work with you, and that you feel comfortable with as well. But asking questions is a good skill to develop. So I brought that into the caregiving experience.
Okay.
Um,
So those of you watching, as I mentioned at the beginning, Toni shared 6 mistakes in the article on Purpose Woman magazine. The link to that is in the text of this video. And we just went over 3 of them, and there are 15 more in her book. And a link to her book is also in the text. So check that out and see if you might find something there that could help you in your caregiving situation now or in a future situation. Like everything that Toni's saying is there's so many things you can do ahead of time to be prepared that you're not caught off guard and you can probably go into it with a little more confidence and a little more ease. I think ease and grace is what kind of oozes from your pages.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you. Yeah, I was hoping to get to that point where I was gentle with
yeah,
people.
yeah.
And people aren't wrong for making mistakes. We all make mistakes, and I eventually learned that making a mistake was one of the fastest ways to learning,
Okay.
what was the right thing to do and
Yeah.
letting go of perfectionism. I have a free gift for people on my website, which is heartofcaregiving.com. There's actually a whole page of free resources. So feel free to go to heartofcaregiving.com and click on as many as you like to download.
Okay, and I'll put that in the text of this video as well once we're done.
Okay,
I hope you
great.
didn't hear that school bus just go by,
No, I
revving
didn't.
its engine. My light didn't go on, so and they're building a roof across the street, so it's really loud here. But yeah, good. Nobody else will hear it but me. Well, Toni, you just gave your website information, but as we wrap this up, can you share a final thought with our viewers? It may be something you've already touched on, but just something you want to leave them with.
A lot of people see caregiving, having to care for someone, um, as something that interrupts their life.
Mm,
They don't view, especially at the beginning, we don't see the value of it or how it's going to enhance our lives. And I have to say, those 14 years with my mother were some of the best years of my life. Talking to her, talking about my dad, talking about her life history. She loved talking about herself. People do. And it
mhm.
passed the time, but I also wrote down her stories. So look at caregiving as an opportunity. You don't know why you're in this position, what God had to do with it, what your purpose is on earth, but go ahead and take advantage of it. And I did mention, come from a place of love, loving that person. You may have past issues with them, but you want to give and receive love in that situation in order to survive it, first of all, but to have it be a more beautiful journey.
Oh, Yeah, the other will just eat you up.
Yeah.
It
Mhm.
will. Thank you, Toni. Thank you so much for your beautiful words, for the work that you're doing. It's so important. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and expertise with all of us, both in the magazine and here on our YouTube channel. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you.
You're very welcome, Jenny. My pleasure.
And I want to thank you for watching the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show. For more information on the On Purpose Woman Global Community and magazine, please click on the links in this video and be sure to check out Toni's website for her free gift for all that she offers. And you can also go there to get the link to the book on Amazon, or you can go
Yes.
directly to the link in the text of this video and check out the book. And for more interviews with amazing women living their lives on purpose, check out our YouTube channel, also in the text of this video.